and it was like a bucket of cold water. He goes, hey man, so how many storage facilities do you have under contract? And I looked at him dead in the eyes and I said, 0. I got back after that mastermind and I hadn't done the work. I was in research mode, I was in consumption mode. I was doing all the things I tell people not to do. Yes, consuming is important, but it's the execution of what you learn that's really gonna like propel you forward. And so recommitted myself to storage just a few months after I decided to do it. And I was under contract a couple of months later on a 43,000 square foot facility in Mississippi. And I got it because I was so crystal clear about my buy box. You're going to learn so much more by executing than you are with the comforting feeling of just consuming content. So go out there and do it because to me, Joe, the worst thing to do is live with regret.
Today, I've got a really good friend. I got an investor, and he's got some really cool things we're talking about, Alex Pardo. So thank you so much, Alex, for coming on today.
Joe, I'm pumped to be here, brother. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to dig into like a little bit of Alex. If you want to give everybody a snapshot of who you are, where you're from, and then we're going to get into what you do.
Yeah, man, look, I'll keep this super short and sweet so we can kind of get to the meat and potatoes of the show. I was born and raised in Miami. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I graduated from college, thought I wanted to be like a CFO or a CEO of a big company. So I took a job working with General Electric in their financial management company. And then I quickly realized, Joe, that I don't want to climb the corporate ladder. One of the things I've gotten pretty good at is reverse engineering my way based on the clarity and the direction that I want to go in my life. And I realized that looking at my boss and her boss all the way up the ladder, working for a company just wasn't going to allow me to live the kind of life I wanted to live and impact the amount of people that I wanted to impact. So I decided to go backpacking around Europe for 3.5 months, visited, I think, 53 cities in like 22 or 23 countries. And it was when I was on the Eurorail, the train going from city to city, where I started to immerse myself in the Rich Dad, Poor Dad's, Think and Grow Rich. I probably read 5 or 6 books that summer. And I made a decision on that train, hey, when I come back to Miami, I'm going to get involved in real estate. And sure enough, you know, it's interesting. Has it ever happened to you, Joe, where like you decide and you commit and then God starts opening up certain doors for you? Well, about a week later, I got to Ibiza and a friend of mine had sent me an email inviting me to something called a Marketing for Deals bootcamp put on by a gentleman named Dave Lindahl, where he was essentially teaching people how to market for real estate deals. I ended up going to that October of 2005. And then about 3 months later, I closed my first wholesale deal.
Wow. So you're talking 20 years, 2 decades of it being.
Dude, I've been at this for a hot minute, man. Yeah, now I spent the first 14 years in the single family space, and it was about 5 years ago that I transitioned into storage. But yeah, man, I've been at this for about 2 decades.
So you obviously don't be fooled by his looks. He looks super young, but he's got 2 decades of doing this and experience. So that's really great. So you got into single family homes. Were you doing this mostly in the Miami area?
Yeah, primarily South Florida. It wasn't until 2017 where I kind of had an epiphany, Joe. Like one of the mistakes I openly share with people is that I got into real estate because I wanted freedom and cash flow and all the benefits that we love and enjoy about real estate. But I ended up playing the transactional game. I ended up getting kind of addicted to the income that you could generate from wholesaling. And I remember in 2017, at this point, I had built a team of about 7 or 8 people. My overhead had grown. And I told my wife, I'm like, you know, yes, real estate has provided for us and we've done well, but where's the cash flow? Like I'm getting taxed at the highest bracket. It started to feel like a grind and a chase. And so we started buying single family rentals in Cleveland, Ohio. And I got to about 4 or 5 of those. And then I quickly realized I don't want to be a landlord and I don't want to own rentals. And so that's what started to like really open my eyes to, okay, single family is great. What's next for me that aligns with my goals and my vision?
Well, I love that too, because when you're just wholesaling, you're getting the big checks, but you're not building wealth. You're getting a good income, but then you start getting overhead. And so I know a lot of folks who they do a lot of deals and they're making a lot of money, but then when you actually look at the overhead and the team and what it takes to get to that, you end up scratching your head at the end of the day saying, well, what's left for me? Right, as the operator and the owner. And many times it's sometimes not as glamorous as you would hope, right?
Yeah,
but
that's right.
You were smart enough to see the vision of, hey, I need to start getting some rental properties because that's what's going to build cash flow. You're having your renters pay off your debt. your properties are going to appreciate over time, and then you get the tax benefits. So you get the four major ways of wealth, but then that comes with challenges too. You're
Right.
adult babysitter at times.
Yeah, not just that, Joe, but what I realized was I think I got to 4 or 5 rentals, and I think I was probably making somewhere between $200 and $350 a month in cash flow. But then once a year, something big would happen to one of these houses, a furnace, a this, a that, and then it would pretty much wipe out my cash flow. And then I just started to do the math. I did the same thing I did in my corporate job. I said, okay, well, if my goal is X, how many houses, what kind of portfolio would I need to have in order to generate X amount of cash flow from these houses? And then I would have to bake in, okay, well, what if an event happens, right? A roof or this or that. I was like, I'm gonna need a pretty big portfolio. And then I started thinking of what that would entail. And I'm like, I don't want 50 something tax bills and roofs and tenants. I'm like, there's gotta be a better way. And I happened to be co-leading a mastermind at that time. And I was coaching somebody who owned a storage facility. And that, brother, is what just really opened my eyes to the storage asset class, because at the time, I incorrectly assumed that if I was going to get involved in bigger deals, the natural progression seems to be multifamily. But multifamily also comes with tenants and toilets and all that kind of stuff I was trying to get away from. So that's when I really started to dive deep into the storage asset class.
So what year was it that you starting to make that choice, that pivot to
Yeah,
to storage?
the beginning of 2019 is when I really started getting serious. In fact, brother, I remember, are you familiar with the Mastermind Collective Genius?
Oh yeah.
So
CG.
great organization, Jason Medley, like I love their leadership, awesome mastermind, some of the top investors in the country. Well, I share that because I want to say it was late 2018 or the beginning of 2019 that I had a presentation. In CG, you give these 45-minute presentations. And I remember I had this whole like PowerPoint deck planned out where I was gonna like wow them with the things I was doing, or at least I thought. And then something happened that morning that I had like a feeling in my stomach, and I'm like this feels fake to go up there and share all these things that are going well when I've built a business I no longer want to be in. And so I completely scrapped the presentation and I just openly like spoke from the heart, and I said, guys, like this is broken. I've built a business that I want to escape from, and here's why. And I was just very vulnerable and transparent. I think at that point, it was like a mental shift that like, I need to figure out how to create a bridge to the next thing. And I remember after that talk, like so many people came up to me and said, man, that's first, I can't believe that you actually shared that. Two, like I feel just like you. And so it just gave me a lot of confidence to step into the direction I felt God wanted me to go into.
And it's funny too, because we build these businesses and then we realize what we've built sometimes doesn't align with what you want. I know when we were doing a lot of wholesaling, there was times when we're doing double-digit deals every month, month in and month out, but I had a team of 10, 12 people. And I'm having to manage different people, and we need a TC. We need all of these different things to help operate this business.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here scratching my head being like, I've got all these mouths to feed. We got all these bills to pay. We're wholesaling a lot of deals. We're still making good money, but my gosh, I wanted to build some type of freedom business. And I'm working more now than I did when I had my W-2 job. And luckily for a great coach of mine, Tom Kroll said, Joe, you need to focus on doing less deals and do bigger deals. Yep. And so now we have definitely shrunk our team down. We're doing less deals, but we're doing bigger deals, and we're actually keeping more money in-house, way less meetings, way less active me being in the business. So I totally feel you there. So back to CG. So you're there and you're realizing you're being transparent, which in this business, it's brave. It's awesome that you did that, because there's sometimes people don't share the real behind the scenes stuff, and you did, which is shout out to you. But that's how you start getting around the right people and you start opening your eyes. So what else is there? So was this where some of these discussions first started happening there about self-storage?
I think the first real discussion I had was with a friend of mine, Mike. We were in Guatemala on a missions trip in Antigua, Guatemala, and he owned a portfolio of facilities. And I started to just ask him questions about it, just get a better understanding. And I remember that conversation was the inspiration for me to feel like, okay, if I decided to shut down my wholesaling business, this is going to be the transition plan, right? And so I just started to research storage, and it's interesting, Joe, because I wish I knew then what I know now. Because in my head, I had built storage to be this like huge endeavor. Like I see all these buildings, I see all these doors. I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go buy these things. And I thought I was going to have to acquire a completely fresh new set of skills. What I know now with certainty is that all the skills I had developed as a single family investor, as a wholesaler, from marketing, lead generation, just how to evaluate deals and talk to owners, acquisitions, dispositions, pretty much all of that has translated over into storage and has helped me. And I thought in my brain, you know, it's interesting because humans, I think it's Tony Robbins that says like we are meaning making machines. We create a story in our head about what we think something is, and then that becomes our reality. And if fortunately the pain of staying in the storage business, the pain of staying in the wholesaling business was greater than the uncertainty and the fear I had about stepping into a new venture. And so I was able to just make that leap. But had I allowed the story that I had created in my head about the fact that I thought I needed money to get into storage, by the way, every single storage deal I've done, I have yet to use any of my own money. So at the time, I thought I
say that again. Say that one more time.
Yeah, brother. So every single storage deal I've done, and I've done well more than a handful, every single one of them, I have yet to use any of my own money.
Wow.
And I remember when I was thinking about making this transition, I started to look at my financial situation. And while I had done well, I was like, I certainly don't have the money it's gonna require, at least in my head, to buy one of these big storage facilities. And I also thought I needed to learn a whole new set of skills. And I learned so much more by deciding, committing, and then the process started to unfold itself. So I'll kind of pause there, but those were some of the things going on around that time, 2019, heading right into 2020.
So you had some maybe limiting beliefs in the beginning, and
Huge.
many of us have that, right? So that's completely normal, which is great. But then you started probably doing a little bit more research. Did you get around the right folks who were like, hey, this is some of the things you got to do?
That's exactly right. So man, COVID came. And I remember I was in San Diego with like Ryan Pineda and a bunch of people that were at CG, like literally the week that NCAA and like the world started to kind of shut down. Yeah. And I remember at that point, it was like, you want to know what? I think now's the time. To me, it was a blessing in disguise. And at that time, people were starting to pivot to do deals virtually. Some had already like transitioned to that. And I'm like, I don't have the energy, the bandwidth to want to do this. I'm just going to start to slowly unwind this machine. And by June, July of 2020, I had shut down the wholesaling business, even though it was profitable. I didn't create the business in a way that it could be sellable, but I was able to sell off certain assets of the business. And then it was December of 2020 that I joined the storage mastermind, and I just committed myself, hey, this is going to be the asset class where I'm going to plant my flag.
Heck yeah. So obviously definite of purpose. You're getting rid of what you were already doing. You broke through some of the, I don't know, it's like these mental roadblocks. Like, I can't stop doing this, right? Because that's all I've been doing, or I'm good at it. So just because you're good at it, but if it doesn't give you the lifestyle that you want, there are other things you could get into, which is wonderful. And this is why I love real estate and just investing in general, because it could be single family homes, multifamily, self-storage. I mean, it could be so many different things. So you make that pivot, it's 2020. You're in a mastermind now about self-storage. So I want to kind of dive into like your first deal. So obviously you're in it now, you're learning, your research mode. How did you even come across your first deal? And what did that deal look like?
Yeah, man, no, it's a great question. And look, and I'll call myself out. So December, I committed to storage. I came into the business overly confident. I thought that I didn't have to do the work because I had had some prior success in real estate. Right. And I remember I was leading our Ascend Mastermind, and one of our members, one of my coaching clients, came up to me. This was the beginning of March, Joe. And it was like a bucket of cold water. He goes, hey man, so how many storage facilities do you have under contract? And I looked at him dead in the eyes and I said, 0. I got back after that mastermind and I hadn't done the work. I was in research mode. I was in consumption mode. I was doing all the things I tell people not to do, right? Yes, consuming is important, but it's the execution of what you learn that's really going to like propel you forward. And so recommitted myself to storage just a few months after I decided to do it. And I was under contract a couple of months later on a 43,000 square foot facility in Mississippi. And I got it because I was so crystal clear about my buy box. One of the things I share with my Storage Wins coaching client is get clarity about what is a deal to you and what is not a deal. I'm talking market size, like demo, like what is your magic wand scenario? And I developed this buy box, and I literally would plant the seed and drop breadcrumbs with everybody I would come in contact with. Hey, this is what I'm looking for. Hey, this is what I'm looking for. And I would follow up. And I'll never forget, it was like a random Tuesday night, and I got a text message from a good friend of mine who I was working with in the storage space, and he said, hey, Alex, I think I found your first deal. Check your email. Checked my email, called him back like 40 minutes later. I'm like, how'd you know that I'd want this? He goes, what do you mean? You've been telling me for the last several months exactly what you're looking for, and here it is.
You
And
spoke
dude,
it into existence, bud. You spoke it into existence.
I guess, man, I was so clear about what I wanted. I knew my why, and it was a non-negotiable for me. I had essentially burned the boats. And dude, I ended up getting SBA financing, and then I brought on an equity partner to fund the difference that I needed. So that was my first deal, a 340 unit storage deal that I was able to buy without using any of my money. And essentially it came from a wholesaler.
Wow. So why did the seller want to sell the unit?
Yeah, man, they were downsizing their portfolio. So you know what's interesting, Joe, and you know this better than most, but you know how in the single family space, like sellers are motivated for a variety of reasons. It could be financially, it could be physical, circumstantial. My experience, storage owners, most of the time, overwhelmingly most of the time, they're getting ready to retire. They have owned these assets for, in some cases, 20, 30 plus years, and they're just ready to like slow down. And that was the case with the storage owner, classic mom and pop owner. Their dad had built the facility, I think, in the 80s, and they were just unwinding. And so we were able to buy it at a really, really good price.
So motivated seller, obviously wanting to retire.
Yep.
And so when we find the real estate business, there's different motivations between wanting to sell a home. There's the same thing, maybe different types of motivation, but once again, when you find a motivated seller where, you know, they're mentally checking out, right? And they just want to be able to move this thing. And so you got in contact with an investor, a wholesaler who found the deal, brought it to you, probably bought, you know, got some type of finder's fee for bringing you the deal because you closed.
Nice finder's fee. Yeah, 70 grand. Nice finder's fee.
Woo! So if you're listening and you want to send Alex a deal, you know, obviously he's paying handsomely for good deals. But, I mean, who wouldn't pay a huge old check because, you know, ultimately you're going to make a lot more.
That's right. That's right. No, in fact, you know, I've never been the one to like ever count somebody else's money. I will pay a finder's fee, whatever it is. It could be six figures. I'm happy to pay it as long as it's a deal for me and it checks what I'm looking for. And so I build relationships with people. I let them know what I'm looking for. I follow through and do what I say I'm going to do. So I had instilled confidence in him because in storage, Joe, it's a little bit different in the single family space in that you're buying a business and you have to go through what's something called a due diligence process, which is generally speaking, it's like 30 to 60 days of due diligence where you're verifying a lot of the income and the expenses of the business. And there's a checklist that you go through. And I was confident. I told him, hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Unless I go out there and there's something like huge that's unexpected, like I'm buying this facility. And so I was able to instill confidence in it, even though I didn't have experience in storage and I hadn't owned storage. And I think that's an important takeaway for people listening is get clear about what you want, share it with people, and then communicate with confidence. Do what you say you're going to do and just develop that reputation that people can trust you because you're somebody who follows through.
So, but you're doing this from Miami.
I am. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Joe, none of my facilities are in Miami. In fact, I look for storage in small markets.
Yeah.
So we run something called unmanned models. So let me kind of paint a picture. A year ago, I owned 104,000 square feet of storage, almost 900 units, 0 employees. Nobody works on site. We have a call center, a third-party management company, and a local boots on the ground that is paid $600 a month. And that is how we run a virtual remote storage portfolio.
So no front desk.
No front desk.
No, just a small call center. You got your boots on the ground guy for $600 a month. You're doing this remote while you're buying in small markets. So did you have to fly out to eventually see it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I flew out when I was under contract. So during the due diligence phase, I went out there for 48 hours. And then I flew back out there for the closing. So in fact, my facilities, I've only been out there twice, during due diligence and then at closing.
Heck yeah. So
Yeah.
well, talk about a business that you could do anywhere around the world, because obviously you love to travel. And so, especially when you're not dealing with 900 different tenants and toilets and
Yeah.
refrigerators and all the stuff. So with self-storage, you do the first deal. Obviously, the light bulb happens. You're like, oh my gosh, now I want to continue to do this. Are you doing it just in one state, or are you doing it in multiple different states now?
Yeah, multiple states. So I own a facility north of Jacksonville on Amelia Island. I've owned a couple in Mississippi. I just closed on one, well, a storage coaching client closed on it, and I'm partnering with her in Illinois, another one in Missouri. And then I've wholesaled about 3 storage facilities as well that didn't quite fit my buy box, but it was still a deal for somebody else. In fact, Joe, what's pretty cool is my very first deal actually wasn't the one in Mississippi. It was a wholesale deal, but the cool thing about this one is that it was a $99,000 wholesale fee that I ended up splitting 3 ways, admittedly. So it was myself and 2 other people. Here's the cool thing about it. We ended up keeping 15% ownership, what we call equity, in the deal, which we still own today. So we were able to make a nice wholesale fee up front, and then we got a small piece of equity, which again, we still own today.
So you're the silent partner getting in on the action while still getting paid to do the deal.
100%.
So I'm going to have Alex drop his contact information. So if you're listening, you're like, whoa, I know somebody selling their storage. I'm sure he's going to want to chat with you, and you can hear my guy's paying. So we're going to drop his details in the show notes too, but I'm going to make sure he says it too at the end of this. So if you're listening, holy cow. So you've been involved with obviously a boatload of deals. What's some advice for somebody that's thinking of like, maybe it's time for me to get into self-storage, because you're not the only one. That's right. I have some friends, really good friends of mine from Rochester, New York, a few of them actually, and they do self-storage, and he's just like, if I could find more, I'm buying more of them. So yeah, this isn't anything new. Obviously, self-storage has been around forever. And the one thing I learned about self-storage is if the economy is going up, people still need a spot to store their stuff. Yeah. If the economy is going down, people need a spot to store their stuff. So neither here or there, it's almost like recession proof, right?
Yeah, we call it recession resistant. And if you like fact check me on this and go to your chat GPT, do some research on Google, it's a very recession resistant asset class. So to your point, Joe, when things tightened up, people downsize. But Americans in general, we consume a lot of things, and we're very attached, unfortunately, in my opinion. Many Americans are just attached to material things, and they don't want to get rid of stuff. So they end up paying between $50 and $350 a month on average storage. And brother, like the average length of stay for our customers is over 2 years. So when people stay, they pay, and that's great from a consistency and a cash flow perspective.
I'll tell you, somebody who's moved from upstate New York. I lived in Rochester, and I moved to Florida. Our house in Florida is actually a little bit bigger than our house in New York, but in Florida, we don't have basements. That's right. We have all that stuff, right? So as we get so many transplants moving from up north to down south, and that we don't have basements here, you store so much in a basement. These Florida peeps, we don't got them down here. So, self-storage becomes a real handy thing. But meanwhile, you get somebody who's either sold their house and they have all these extra things. When I was in my early 20s, had self-storage for, probably about a year. So it definitely comes in handy, and there's not one class who doesn't need it. So if somebody wants to learn more about self-storage, obviously they want to get in contact with you. Yeah. Obviously you have a mentorship now too, and I want you to kind of dial into that. What's that like?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So if anybody's interested in just learning more about storage, there's a couple of resources I'd love to share. The Storage Wins podcast. So I release 2 podcast episodes every single week, and it's just 100% about self-storage. I have a YouTube channel as well. If you just search Alex Pardo, and you'll see a bunch of videos about storage. And then we have the Storage Wins Facebook group, which is just a great community to plug in, meet others in the storage space. And then Joe, thank you for the opportunity to share. But for those that are just interested, our entire program and community is designed around one goal, is to help you buy your first cash flowing storage facility within the next 6 months or so. And we do that with weekly growth coaching calls and just a community and people that are going to support and guide you and just give you the roadmap and the playbook. So you guys can learn more about that at storagewins.com, WINS, storagewins.com.
So YouTube, well, obviously we have him here. He's got a podcast, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, obviously too, I'm going to say it right here live, but this is something that I've been wanting to get into. So I'm going to be connecting with you offline so we could chat more about me getting into some of this too. I love single family homes. I love doing creative finance, but you could do creative finance with even storage too. It doesn't have to be taking loans every time, although it works. But I know people who are able to buy self-storage even with creative finance. So to get dialed in, I got to say this every time, you got to get around the right people doing the business and then doing it well. Okay. Yeah. There's two different things there, but you got to get around it. If you're thinking of getting into this, doing it all on your own, trying to figure it out on your own is the longest, most expensive way to do it.
Right.
When you get around the right people, you feel like you could just, anything is possible, and you're getting connected with other folks that maybe find your deal, like what Alex has talked about. So I'm subscribed to your YouTube channel already. I'm going to make sure my butt is in that Facebook group. If I got to check to see if I am or not. I'm in like a lot, but I'm going to
we'll make sure to add you. But Joe, man, last thing I want to share is I want to publicly acknowledge you and thank you, man, for all the great content that you put out with your community, Creative Finance Playbook, because man, I love creative finance. The facility I own in Florida, in Amelia Island, was bought on 90% seller financing with some incredible terms. So what you teach people in terms of creative finance and how to go out and do deals, that can be applied to storage because I've done it. I've had coaching clients do it. So appreciate all the effort with the podcast and all the great content that you and Jen are putting out because it's impacting and helping a lot of people, man. Thank you so much.
Well, I love that too. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm looking forward. We're going to be seeing each other in a few weeks down in Tampa at the mastermind that we're all part of, Family Mastermind. Shout out Matt Andrews for that.
Love that guy.
Because I'm going to be chatting with you. So when I see you, I'm coming in hot. Just a heads up. I know my wife will be too.
Right.
But we're going to connect. And I can't wait to continue to follow you guys. And actually, I'm going to be a part of it too because I've got way too many friends that are crushing it in self-storage. And I could see the huge benefit and upside. And fun fact, when I was still in my car dealership world way back when, we sold a truck to this guy who bought self-storage in town next to where the dealership was, right down the road. And then he was like talking about how it was older and the sellers were motivated. They were retiring, like what you kind of said. And he was adding additions onto it as well. And, you know, from what I was following him for a long time, my gosh, he did so well on that deal. I probably should have got into it back then, but neither here, neither there. I'm still young. I got plenty of time, but now is the time. So guys, if you're listening, make sure you get in touch with Alex. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. And last words of wisdom for anybody watching.
Yeah, listen, challenge any limiting beliefs you have. It starts with a decision, commit, find your tribe, find the person that you can step into that can help you. And then like our mutual friend and mentor says, take massive imperfect action. You're going to learn so much more by executing than you are with the comforting feeling of just consuming content. So go out there and do it because to me, Joe, the worst thing to do is live with regret. So like you said, now is the time. Just it starts with the decision, commit to do it, find your person in your tribe, and then get after it.
That is spot on. Some golden advice right there. So if you're listening, make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Creative Finance Playbook. We're on all the different podcast channel. And if you aren't already in our Facebook group, Creative Finance Playbook with Jen and Joe, y'all need to get in there because we're sharing stuff like this in there all of the time. And thanks once again, Alex, for coming on. And we'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody.
Take care.